Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama,
हरे कृष्णा। हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय, श्री प्रभुपाद की जय, गौर भक्तवृंद की जय। हरि बोल। हरे कृष्णा। Dravida Prabhu, you are there on the call? Hare Krishna Prabhu.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol, I recognize somebody there.
We are really grateful to you for your association today and the first Damodar month. Thank you very much. Take it away, Prabhu. It's all yours now. All glories to you, all glories to Prabhupada.
Glories to Prabhupada. Thank you for having me. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhu bhevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So should I start with 922 here? Bhagavad-Gita?
Yeah.
I guess that was a yes. Okay, so I've been asked to speak a little bit about Bhagavad-Gita 922. And I'm going to begin with, as we always should before we give class on Prabhupada's books. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So on this 31st day of October 2020, I'm in San Diego and my audience is in New Jersey. So we're going to speak on Srila Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, text 22. This is, of course, the most confidential knowledge chapter. And this is a very significant verse, as they all are, very famous. Does anyone want to unmute themselves there so that they can respond to the chanting? Susan, I'm sorry.
Yes, Prabhu, we can respond.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ananyas chintayanto mam.
Ananya Chintayanto Ma
Ye jana payupasate.
Ye jana paripasate,
Tesham nityabhayuktanam.
Tesham
Nitya
Yogakshemam vahamyaham.
Yogakshemam Vahamyam.
Okay, it's a little hard to do it that way. So I'm just going to read through the word by words myself, and then we'll go into the translation. Ananya, having no other object, chintayantaha, concentrating, mam, on me, ye, those who, janaha, persons, payupasate, properly worship, tesham, of them, nitya, always, abhiyuktanam, fixed in devotion, yoga, requirements, kshamam, protection, vahami, carry, aham, I. So Krishna says to Arjuna, but those who always worship me with exclusive devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack and I preserve what they have. Srila Prabhupada's purport. One who is unable to live for a moment without Krishna consciousness cannot but think of Krishna 24 hours a day, being engaged in devotional service by hearing, chanting, remembering, offering prayers, worshiping, serving the lotus feet of the Lord, rendering other services, cultivating friendship, and surrendering fully to the Lord. Such activities are all auspicious and full of spiritual potencies, which make the devotee perfect in self-realization, so that his only desire is to achieve the association of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such a devotee undoubtedly approaches the Lord without difficulty. This is called yoga. By the mercy of the Lord, such a devotee never comes back to this material condition of life. Kshema refers to the merciful protection of the Lord. The Lord helps the devotee to achieve Krishna consciousness by yoga. And when he becomes fully Krishna conscious, the Lord protects him from falling down to a miserable condition of life, or a miserable conditioned life. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara. So it's always important to see, read these verses in the Shastrian context. So if you recall, Krishna, in the last two verses, he's describing those who worship him indirectly, who they study the Vedas. This is the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas. They drink the somi juice, and their motive is to go to the heavenly planets and enjoy. And so they worship Krishna indirectly, because the demigods are all Krishna's extensions. But if one doesn't want to worship Krishna purely out of love, but he has some material motivation, then one will generally worship a demigod. And in this case, Krishna says, and they can achieve, they take birth, purified of sin-free actions, they take birth on the pious heavenly planet of Indra, where they enjoy godly delights. But then what happens? It's just like a credit card. You're accumulating all of this punya, which is to your credit, and then when you get to the heavenly planets, you're spending it. So after enjoying it, Bhuktva Swargalokam Vishalam. Vishalam means vast, vast and variegated varieties of sense pleasures we can't even imagine here, and for a long, long time. But then Chine Punya Matya Lokam Vishanti. When the punya is exhausted, one falls down again to this world of death, birth and death. He calls it Martya Loka. So what's the final verdict here? Evam tuhi dhammam anupapanna gatagatam kama kama labante. That by this practice of this Trihi Dharma, worshiping the three Vedas that have so much about the materialistic sacrifices, one just goes and comes. You don't really make any progress in your mission of going back to Godhead. In other words, it's a huge diversion, worshiping the demigods. And we're going to speak about this later because, part of Kartik month is Govardhan Puja. That's also coming up in a couple of weeks. And that very much directly addresses this idea of not worshiping the demigods, specifically Indra, but simply worshiping Krishna and those dear to him, namely Govardhan Hill. So then Krishna says, and Prabhupada puts in this but at the beginning here, because now Krishna really changes he says, on the other hand, those who always worship me with exclusive devotion. So let's just carefully go through this verse. Ananyas chintayanto mam. The first thing is that one is absorbed in thinking of Krishna. And as Prabhupada so wonderfully expresses at the beginning of this purport, one is unable to live for a moment without Krishna consciousness, cannot but think of Krishna 24 hours a day. So what comes to mind is Lord Chaitanya's pastimes and what he taught and what he showed by his own life. That he just being separated from Krishna was unbearable. He felt that like every moment was like 10 million years. And so, and he taught that to us, that even though we're born in the Kali Yuga and we're unqualified in so many ways, because Lord Chaitanya, Krishna came as Lord Chaitanya and taught this easy process of chanting the holy name as a way of getting prema. Lord Chaitanya is known as the most merciful devotee, Namo Mahavadanyaya, and it means most munificent. He's most generous. You don't have to have any prerequisites. It doesn't matter where you're born, what your social status is. gender, anything like that. If you're ready to take up the process of chanting in that mood that Lord Chaitanya taught, Trinara Pisuni Chena, Tarora Pisahishnana, Amanina Manadena, Kirtaniya Sadahari. More humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, to think all praise belongs to others, none belongs to me. Such qualities attract the Lord to bless one with the power to chant his name incessantly until the final hour. And that's exactly how we can come to the point of always thinking of Krishna, by taking up the process of Bhakti Yoga, as Srila Prabhupada has given us, following in the footsteps of Lord Chaitanya and the six Goswamis. And so that everything we do, everything we aspire for is directly related to Krishna and to pleasing Krishna. Don't forget that in a few verses, Krishna will say, it's very easy to please me. As opposed to these elaborate sacrifices, you know how dangerous it is. If you're worshiping the sun god, you're worshiping Indra, you have to have all the mantras just right. You have to have it at the right time. It's so expensive, so involved. And if you make one mistake, it could cause havoc. Just like, remember Twashta, he was so upset when Indra killed his son, Vishwarup, who he had taken up the role of the guru of the demigods, but he had what Indra saw as some kind of discrepancy. He was offering some worship to the demons that was part of his line. And Indra, he flew off the handle, as he is wont to do, and he chopped off his 3 heads, right? And what happened? Twashta was furious. He had agreed to the demigod's request that he would give his son as their guru so they would have some strength to fight the demons. And now look what happened. So he performed his sacrifice in order to get invoke a demon who would kill Indra. But what happened? He chanted one word wrong in reverse. And because of, he was so upset. And the result was, instead of getting a demon to kill Indra, he got a devotee in the body of a demon, Vritrasura, who was killed by Indra and sent back to Godhead. So that's just illustrative of how difficult it is to perform these sacrifices properly. And the wonderful thing is, we don't need to. We don't need to. We take up Lord Chaitanya's instruction of being very humble and tolerant like a blade of grass, and simply giving honor to others. And also, nadanang najanang nasundarim. This is exactly contrary to the motivation of those who worship the demigods to go to the heavenly planets. No material motive. This is what Rupa Goswami taught, what we aspire for. Anyabhilashita shunyam, being devoid of all other motives other than simply trying to please Krishna and Guru and Vaishnavas like that. So that's what this verse describes. In contrast to those with material motives who worship the demigods, those who simply worship me alone, paryupasate. Paryupasate means properly worship, or worship in every respect. Tesham nityabhayuktanam, they're always linked to me, fixed in devotion, Prabhupada says. They're fixed in devotion. And Krishna provides what they lack and preserves what they have. Now this phrase, yoga kshema, is an important, like, Sanskrit idiom. Sometimes it's seen in a material sense. Yoga are the things you need to live, and kshema is your security. But in the present context, Krishna Prabhupada describes what this is. When the devotee's only desire is to achieve the association of the Lord, then the devotee undoubtedly approaches the Lord without difficulty. This is called yoga. So Krishna is doing everything that we need in order to provide us with a means to link up to him in devotion. He sends his pure devotees. He speaks the Bhagavad-Gita. He speaks the Uddhava-Gita. He comes as Lord Chaitanya, and he inspires Srila Prabhupada to undergo so many austerities out of compassion and create this wonderful society that we're a part of. Also that we can link up with him without any motive, simply develop our natural, inherent love for him. This is something very important to understand, that what we're trying to achieve is not something unnatural or artificial. As Lord Chaitanya teaches to Sanatana Goswami in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Nityasiddha Krishna prema sadhika bunoi shovanadi shuddha chitte hodaye udoy. that this eternal perfection of prema, of pure love for Krishna, is inherent within every soul. It's not something artificial that has to be brought from outside. And simply by the practice of bhakti, beginning with hearing, chanting, etc., as Prabhupada delineates the nine processes here, that natural love is awakened. It's there in every single soul. And this is why there's absolutely no restriction according to time, place, candidate. I've just been studying this verse 932, which is coming up in 10 verses here. And that's an expression where Krishna says, Mami parta vipashita yepisu papayonia, striyo vaishasatashudus tepiyati paramgitim. So in Srila Prabhupada's original translation to that, he had the four categories: the papayonis, and the ladies, and the vaishyas, and the shudras. Four separate categories. Now the papayonis, well, all of us who were born outside of India and were trained and lived in America just as ordinary people, we're infused with all kinds of sinful activities, sinful desires. So we come under this category, Kirata Gunanda Pulinda Pukrisha. This is a verse spoken by Shukadeva Goswami in the second canto as he's preparing to speak the Bhagavatam to King Parigat. And the list there, Prabhupada was very fond of this verse because it more or less illustrated what he was trying to do and what he experienced as he spread this movement all over the world. These Kiratas, Hunandas, these are the different groups of people who are outside of India, outside of the Vedic culture. And so they're the papayonis, just inherently born into sin, having complete ignorance of what's going on. So, hey, Americans certainly fit into that category, practically universally. But it says there that Papa and Yadapashriya, other Papa are sinful persons. This is not a complete list, he said. Yadapashriyashriya, those who take shelter of one he who's worthy to take shelter of Krishna or Krishna's pure devotee. Shuddhanti. This is the key word, is they become purified. Shuddhanti tasmai papa Vishnuvena. And therefore I offer my obeisance to this all-powerful Vishnu, whose energy purifies everything, just like the sun can purify any place it falls on. So this is the movement we live in, and this verse is directly pertinent to that, and Prabhupada's wonderful purport here. So he gives what we lack. Well, what do we lack? We practically lack everything in terms of our needs for spiritual needs. That all had to be supplied by Krishna and preserve what they have. So Prabhupada says, he helps the devotee achieve Krishna consciousness by yoga, bhakti yoga. And when he becomes fully Krishna conscious, he protects him from falling down to a miserable condition of life. So this is called shelter, taking shelter of Krishna. We live in dangerous times. Does anyone not understand that? I mean, this pandemic, the election is everybody in the world is anxious about the result of this election, and the climate change and the nuclear weapons and everything in our own personal lives. Nothing is secure in this world. And as Kali Yuga progresses, it's just going to get more and more disorganized and dangerous. So what do we need? We need shelter. We need shelter. We're not going to get any kind of material shelter that's going to be, I mean, we should take care and do what's needed to preserve as best we can, certainly. But our real shelter is at Krishna's lotus feet. That means at any time, if there's danger arriving or there's some complete change in our circumstance, then we run to Krishna. Means that we call upon the understanding that we have, and we call out to him with complete helplessness. How many times do we see that in Krishna Lila? Whether it's Draupadi trying to be disrobed, or Kunti, in the forest with her sons. I mean, what does she say? She, in her beautiful prayers, Vipadak Santatakshasvat, she goes through a whole delineation of the dangers that she went through and the difficulties she went through. A couple of verses. And then she says something very amazing. Vipadak Santatakshasvat tattva tattva jagadguru bhavatu darshanam yaksat apunar bhavadarshana. That let those dangers happen again and again, because by the dangers coming, we see you again and again. And by seeing you, we don't have to see birth and death. In other words, the difficulties that we go through in living in the material world, trying to spread Krishna consciousness, trying to be Krishna conscious. These should be instances where we run to Krishna and take shelter of him. Just like the holy name. All of us are familiar with chanting. I assume that we've experienced chanting japa and kirtan and so forth. And we know that we're trying to cultivate a taste for that holy name. That taste for the holy name is the first awakening, dawning of what eventually becomes bhava and prema, right? Ruchi and sakti, which is attraction for Krishna, bhava and prema. These are the last four steps in that ladder from faith, from shraddha to prema, from faith to love. So how do we develop that taste and see it actually increase steadily? It's not easy because there are so many distractions, and it's so easy to become diverted, and it's so easy to commit offenses. The first offense being inattention. So there are so many beautiful expressions, prayers to the holy name for attraction. There's one Namashtaka by Rupa Goswami, and he has two prayers in there for to the holy name for more attraction. He says, Agadamana Yashoda Nandano Nandasunu Kamalanayana Gopi Chandra Vrindavanendra Pranata Karuna Krishna Vityanika Swarupe Try Mamanata Vichaya Vardatam Namadeha. O holy name, Namadeha. You have many forms. Agadamana, you who killed the Agasura demon. Yashoda Nandana, Nandasunu. Kamalanayana, you of the lotus eyes. Gopi Chandra, you who are like a moon that causes the gopi's eyes to blossom, just like certain flowers, lotus flowers at night. Gopi Chandra, Vrindavan, and the Lord of Vrindavan. And then this one I love, Pranata Karuna. This is a name that means you who are so most merciful to those who surrender to you. So, and of course, Krishna. Aneka, you have unlimited names. Please increase my attraction to you more and more. And then the last verse in the series, the eighth verse in this Namashtaka, it's just a beautiful verse. Narada vino jivana sador miniya samadhi pura tam Krishna nama kamam spadame vasane vasena sada. So he says, oh, holy name, you're the inspiration for the vina of Narada. Narada vino jivana. Sudhormi niryasa maruri pura. You are a flood of sweet nectar, the sweetest and the thickest nectar that there could be. From Krishna, oh, if you please, holy name, please let me, oh, my tongue, taste the sweetness in you more and more as I chant you. So these simple prayers are important because it makes us realize that our greatest shelter is Krishna's merciful holy name that has been given to us by Srila Prabhupada and, of course, propagated by Caitanya Mahaprabhu. So, one of the keys here is to worship Krishna with exclusive devotion. Isn't that? And this is a nice segue into the Govardhan Lila, I think, which is appropriate also in this Damodar month. And that is that, what is that Leela all about? Well, there's a lot of things, as Krishna's expert, he does a lot of things at the same time. And one of the things that's most clear is that he wants to teach the world, and, at least superficially, it looks like he's teaching Nanda Maharaj and the others. There's no need to worship Indra. There's no need to worship any demigods. And so he angers Indra by stopping his sacrifice and using all the paraphernalia for worshiping Govardhan Hill and the cows and the Brahmins and the ecstatic Govardhan Puja that we celebrate. So Indra reacts, as he often is, and as I mentioned in a different context, he overreacts and completely loses it. And he decides to completely inundate and destroy the whole coward community. He's so covered that he doesn't realize that this little 7-year-old boy is actually his master, Krishna. And he calls him talkative and foolish boy, and he's somehow the cowards, came under his. I wrote a little poem about this. It says, when Krishna stopped King Indra's sacrifice, that monarch of the heavens threw a fit. Those cowards took that foolish boy's advice. Such insolence I never shall permit. So Indra sent the clouds of devastation to pour down catastrophic hail and rain with lightning, thunder, winds without cessation. The cowards called to Krishna in their pain to show his coward friends his boundless love and crush King Indra's pride for his own good. Sri Krishna lifted Govardhan above and saved his friends while 'neath the hill they stood. So that's a little summary of the Leela. But there's so many things going on at the same time when you read the Krishna book, and Srila Prabhupada brings in so much of the commentaries. And so the first thing is that basic lesson that don't worry, if you take full shelter of me, then you don't need to worship the demigods and you don't need to fear the wrath of the demigods. I'll protect you from all sinful reactions which they administer. You'll be completely free of that. And of course, what happened? So these 7 days and nights, nobody slept, nobody did anything but just gaze wonderfully at Krishna, which they couldn't do before. You remember? He's always going out and coming. He's playing with the boys and he's playing with the gopis and he's with his mother. And so they get glimpses of him and they always remember him. But here they were able to have his darshan for 7 days straight in the most wonderful way. And so he's giving them so much mercy that way. And of course, he's teaching, as I mentioned, that you don't have to worship anyone besides him, and that he will always protect. Now, this is part of the yogic shema. Krishna provides everything, and he protects. That's more explicit in the 6 processes of surrender. The first thing, what are those 6 processes? Anukulyasya sankalpa, pratikulyasya varjanam, rakshishati vishvaso, goptadvevananantata, atmanikshepakarpane shadvadha, shadanagati. So in the process of surrender, the first thing is to accept those things that are favorable for Krishna. Now, sometimes those are not immediately pleasing to us. And anyone who joined back in the day when I was, ISKCON was in the 70s, was if you joined, you moved in. Basically, there was hardly any congregation. So immediately there's the shock, of the hours. Who gets up at 3 in the morning or 3:30 in the morning in order to get that? So that in itself is a big surrender. But if you want to be a Hare Krishna, if you want to get the mercy and you want to progress, then you have to surrender to that. So you accept the hours and you accept, the discipline, the chanting, the duties, all these things. And then there's so many things you have to give up that you were attached to. Of course, there's the 4 regular principles, which is often very challenging, especially at first for many devotees. But by the positive process of devotional service, centering on the chanting of the holy name, both in kirtan and in japa, one gets the spiritual strength to accept those things that are favorable, that are maybe not so pleasing, and give up those things that are unfavorable, which you think are very pleasing. So as you go on, then you get to the second set of 2 things, rakshishati vishvaso gopidvevadanantata. And this rakshishati is conviction that Krishna will protect in any circumstance. And this is a big aspect of surrender, because part of being in the material world is having so many strategies for defense. That's one of the 4 things, right? Eating, sleeping, mating, defending. So there's so many dangers. And so you protect yourself. This insurance, that insurance, you form alliances here and there, all kinds of things. So real surrender to Krishna means being confident of his protection. And we saw that beautifully illustrated in Prabhupada's life. How, he left his business, he had no money for years. Then in that poverty-stricken condition, he gets on a boat, not an airplane, but a boat with no money. He'd never been on a boat like that before. And it's a long, grueling trip to America. He had 2 heart attacks. And he arrives, he has 1 contact, he has no money, doesn't know where he's going to live here. And yet he undertook all that, confident of Krishna's protection. And Krishna protected it wonderfully and provided everything he needed. He had, eventually had so much men and money, as he said, of course, ladies too. And he was able to, directly, not experience and directly portray and exemplify the meaning of that phrase, that Krishna will protect and provide. Goptradve means to provide you with your necessities. So that's exactly yogic shema. So this is the movement that we're in. And as Srila Prabhupada presents here in his Bhagavad-Gita as it is, he's always bringing it to the point of pure Krishna consciousness. I've been giving Bhagavad-Gita class here and in other venues for years and years, so we've been around Bhagavad-Gita so many times. And I always notice, we come to the third chapter, which is all about, karma yoga. And there's a lot about sacrifice there, especially starting with the 9th verse, Yagyartar Kamanonyatra. Everything you do has to be performed as a sacrifice for Krishna. Otherwise, whatever you do is going to bind you to this world. So there's a lot about sacrifice and giving up the fruits of one's activity. And in practically all the purpose, as soon as Krishna mentions sacrifice, Prabhupada brings up, and the main sacrifice in this age is the Harinam Sankirtan. Yagya Sankirtana Praya Janti Sumedasa. Those who are intelligent worship the Yuga avatar of this age, Lord Caitanya, chiefly, not exclusively, but chiefly by the process of Harinam Sankirtan. And that it's so pleasing to Krishna. Just that simple act of raising one's voice, and the dancing is so important, because all the senses are being purified when you do that. I like to bring up to the devotees here, I brought it up several times. There's something called Taurya Trikena. Taurya Trikena simply means singing, dancing, and playing musical instruments. And think of it, first of all, from the material point of view, how powerful, the music and the dancing. There's so many clubs and so many music festivals and all of these things that are powerful conditioning, because it very much absorbs the mind and the body. But if it can be in the lowest modes of nature, as we know, intoxicated dancing, so many different things. But those same three things, which are so powerful, Lord Chaitanya engaged in the Sankirtan for the glorification of the Lord. And that's why they're so powerful. Because if you really get into the chanting and the dancing and the clapping and playing in rhythm, it very quickly purifies the senses. And you very quickly get a taste. Even as a preliminary taste, you're so conditioned. But that will, can draw you back into the association of devotees. So the process is so powerful, and Prabhupada says there's not even any knowledge involved. If you're ready to fully take up that process of Sankirtan, then you can achieve the highest levels of bhakti, even from any stage in this Kali Yuga. So that's appropriate here. Ananyas Chintayanto Mam. Again and again, Krishna comes back to this point. The basic principle is to be Krishna conscious. It's so axiomatic that we sometimes forget it. But filling our minds with thoughts of Krishna. I think you have a temple there with some deities, or at home you have deities, and becoming absorbed in seeing them, serving them, and meditating on Krishna's form and qualities and pastimes and his name, of course. This is what it means to be Ananyas Chintayanto Mam, to think of Krishna with undeviating attention. And that opens up everything, because don't forget, we're naturally attracted to Krishna. This material life is unnatural. It's a very artificial position for the soul, and that's why we can never be at peace here. There's no question. I was studying this verse again and again. I love this one. It says, Yehi Sangsparjaja Boga Duka Yonai Evate, in the 5th chapter. Some of you may be familiar with it. Krishna, when I hear this verse, I think about it. It's such a revolutionary concept. Just think about it, that the very pleasures that come from the senses contact their objects. And don't forget that the mind is the 6th sense. Many of these pleasures are just subtle mental or emotional pleasures, but through the eyes, through the ears, but it's really the mind that's, enjoying, so-called enjoying. So those very pleasures are the source of your misery. Dukkha yonayevate. And part of the misery is that they're temporary. Adyantabanta konteya, they have a beginning and an end, O konteya, and the wise person does not engage in them. Well, what are we going to do then? We're part and parcel of Krishna. We are enjoying beings. He's Anandamaya Vyasad. He's full of Ananda, made of bliss. There's no question of him enjoying. He's God. But we're part and parcel of him, and we're trying to enjoy in our conditioned state separate from him, which is a losing proposition. Being completely convinced of that, then it's not that we have to suppress this enjoying spirit, but we have to direct it toward Krishna. In other words, just like what is deity worship? You go in the temple and there's a full archery going on. Well, there's the eyes are seeing the beauty of the deity, the nose is smelling the incense and the flowers, the ears are hearing the beautiful kirtan, the touch, you're touching the lamps and so many different things. All the senses, and the feet are dancing, and so everything is engaged. All the senses are engaged, just like Maharaj Ambarish, Abhimana Krishna Madhava. So it's sublimating these desires and these sensations that otherwise keep us bound to this world. And that's the way, this is what's so wonderful about this Damodar month. To sing that song every month, every day, Namam Vishwaram Satchidananda Rupam, Lasat Kundalam Gokale Brajamanam. So in meditation on Krishna, especially I have to, put in a plug for the wonderful poetry we have, the Sanskrit poetry, that are all of them, they're verses for meditation. We sing these songs. If you study the meaning, it just gives you a picture, the fragrances, the sensations, just in the sound. And it's because it's absolute. It's not different from Krishna, not different from experience. And in that prayer, because Satyavrata Muni he's expressing precisely this, that I don't want a liberation. He several times says that. I don't care about liberation. All I want is to see your beautiful, baby form, and Mother Yashoda kissing that form. That's all I want. I don't care about anything. So that's what this is. Unable to live for a moment without Krishna consciousness. That means that one has awakened his love for Krishna. And just imagine what it's like, to always have that object of love at hand. Now, of course, the highest, expression of love or experience of love in our sampradaya is love and separation. So sometimes it looks like, oh, this is agonizing. You read about Radharani, all the gopis when Krishna went to Dwarka, they're described, they're just walking around and, constantly crying, and all of the residents of Vrindavan are like that. Well, Lord Chaitanya's agony of separation, he would rub his face against the wall of the Gambhir, and blood would come. They'd have to hold him back from doing, But paradoxically, that expression of intense emotion and separation gives one a sense of Krishna's presence that's even greater, because you're even more. It's the intensity of the meditation and the love for Krishna that brings him near. So there's a paradox there. In the material side, it's all pain. If your lover is gone, or if he's gone and married someone else, oh my God, it's just like you can hardly, you think day to day, moment to moment. It's just pain, because it's all based on one's own personal gratification. But when one is connected to Krishna through the process of bhakti and is purified, the heart, then there's no question, unable to live for a moment without Krishna, thinking of Krishna. So how can we do that? By constantly hearing chanting, by constantly finding ways to serve and glorify Krishna. When you study Prabhupada's life, his 12 years, after he left and came, we have so much record of that. And of course, we have also of his life before. It was all the same. But he was using every moment for glorifying Krishna. He can't, we got an audience, even a few people in a Bowery loft somewhere. He just, pour out the nectar, right? And a few were receptive to it, and they became attracted and were able to help him start the movement. But then when he had, the 22nd Avenue, it was like, finally, he's got his own audience. You listen to those lectures, Prabhupada's voice is cracking, He's so excited. He's got an audience that is really interested, and they're taking up the processes, some of them, after almost a year of going here and there, But then, when he went to San Francisco, it exploded even more. And he had disciples, and then he had temples, and he had, and meanwhile, he's writing his books. What was he doing? From moment to moment, every day, he's glorifying Krishna. And that keeps one totally connected by this sound vibration and description. And so I wanted to, if we have time, share some of the verses, that Srila Prabhupada has given us. This one verse, it happens to be in the later part of the 10th canon. Prabhupada has it in his Krishna book, a beautiful pastime of Krishna blessing the Brahmins' wives, and it's interesting because they first again he's teaching how this karma kanda, this worship of the demigods, doesn't get you anywhere. So the boys are hungry, and they ask Krishna and Balaram, please, we're so hungry.